Something's different. New China?
In a way.
Coming up next, Webster.
Good morning. My sympathies this morning are with the people who live along the Squamish Highway from the other side of Horseshoe Bay through Squamish to Whistler. And I think with gale warnings in force again, Alec Fraser owes the public a better explanation than he gave in our BC TV News Hour last night, which was as follows.
There is a lot of water being held up above at the 4,000 and 5,000 foot level, and if it decides to go, we have further problems, and it seems the water seems to come down the existing stream beds that now exist, and that we have constant patrol on the road 24 hours a day, and as a matter of fact, that's how we caught the Strachan Creek thing.
At least that was a concrete bridge. Who knows what else might happen on that particular highway. But Premier Bennett, when he was on this program a couple of weeks ago, promised top priority, high priority, to make sure that things were safe along the Squamish Highway. And I think Mr. Fraser better come out with some more information for the very worried people. Maybe their fault they built there. I can't shed tears for all the big investors at Whistler, but the highway has got to be made safe, and the homes have got to be made safe, or something else must be done alternatively. That's one thing. We're dealing with that tomorrow morning, I hope, in detail, and perhaps if we're lucky, we might even get Mr. Fraser to appear in the program. One of the hardest social credit cabinet ministers to catch. However, maybe he hasn't been briefed on it yet. Who knows? Back to the Pierce report and fishing. There's a new movement in the fishing industry by which many people live or die. I'm a little bit cynical about fishermen. Said to one this morning, if we gave you permission to catch all the herring in the sea, you'd catch it. And next year you'd be asking for more subsidies or selling your boats or low interest rate loans. But I've got three good fishermen here this morning who've got a plan to battle the Pierce report and to get a better united front for fishermen. And I've got here John Sanderson of the Pacific Trawlers Association, John Rivard of the Native Brotherhood, and Ted Asu from Cape Mudge of the Pacific Coast Salmon Seiners Association. But first, have I got a propagandist here for the South African government? Because the right thing to do is not to like South Africa. Remember when they banned the South African booze when the NDP was in? Then when social credit came in, being a little bit more to the right, we got South African booze again. Well, this man's name is Dr. Andre Visser. And he represents an organization which I have never heard before, called the South Africa Foundation. We'll find out whether he's a propagandist for apartheid or whether he's a reasonable man after the break. Dr. Andre Visser is from Washington, D.C., where he's the Deputy Director of the South Africa Foundation. Now, every South African spokesman I've interviewed up to now, Dr. Visser, has been an apologist for the South African government. Are you an apologist for the government?
No, none whatsoever.
How come?
Well, the thing is, what we try and do is to try and bring perspective to the debate in South Africa. We are a completely multiracial organization. We are completely independent. We get no funds from the government. As a matter of fact, all the contributions towards the foundation aren't even tax deductible in South Africa.
Just a minute, multiracial. You represent, and you are what are you? You're an Afrikaner.
Oh, yes.
Afrikaner.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're mixing in with an organization with colored people speaking for South Africa, for North America?
Yes.
I thought you had almost total, except in some areas of sports, apartheid.
Oh, no, no, no. I think a big problem is that people still look at South Africa the way it was in 1948 when the Nationalist Party came to power. And that was crude desegregation, there's no doubt about that. But the policies have changed. I mean, when the government himself, the Prime Minister, spells out to the white people in South Africa, he will have to adapt or die, I think that is indicative of significant change.
He means adapt or die in a bloody revolution with 5 black men or 5 black men and colored people to 1 white man.
That's right. So we have to change. We have to sort of bring about a system where there will be greater freedom and equality for all within South Africa.
There isn't yet, is there?
There isn't.
People on the left would say that South Africa is today very close to being a fascist state.
I suppose so. I would have trouble with that.
No, what's your interpretation of it? I mean, you wouldn't say it was a free democracy where one man equals 1 vote, would you?
No, I think it's a partial democracy, and it's certainly a partial democracy as far as the whites are concerned. When it comes to the blacks, it's a very much an authoritarian state and so on, with gross denial of human rights for the black people within South Africa.
Say that again. It's an authoritarian state with...
gross denial of human rights for blacks within South Africa.
Well, that's a little bit more than authoritarian, isn't it?
I think authoritarian has the possibility to move towards a democracy. And I think this is what's happening. I think the democratic process is being extended slowly, and far too slowly for my liking. Excuse me. But it is being extended to include blacks. I think the most significant thing in this is the President's Council, for example, in which for the first time in the history of South Africa you have whites, coloreds, and Indians, who are called East Indians in this country, sitting around a conference table and trying to work out a new constitution for South Africa.
Oh, it wouldn't be any more complicated than ours, I don't suppose, except that the lines are more, excuse me, more clearly drawn over there.
That is so, yes, that is so.
But, you know, again, just to my general knowledge, before we get down to specifics,
yes.
I think of the Biko case,
yes,
where a famous black spokesman is apparently hammered to death in a jail cell.
Yes, that is true, that is true.
Was anything ever done about those who killed Biko?
They were reprimanded, and quite frankly, I think it was a blot in our name that any human being should have been treated that way, and also that the perpetrators of that crime should have been treated in such a light way.
So therefore, it's the kind of thing that we used to get in the southern states 20 years ago.
That's right, that's
that
right.
kind of thing.
That's right. But I would like to point out at this point, you know, the Biko case, regrettable as it is, I think must also be seen not as the normal norm in South Africa. It was an aberration, a very regrettable one, but it doesn't happen every day.
But you're trying to clear the minds of people like myself. For instance, I still think of Soweto.
Yes.
And I can see the people from these dreadful little shacks being handled very brutally by white soldiers, white policemen.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's look at at Soweto. Soweto is a very bad area outside of Johannesburg. However, to characterize it as a huge slum is just not accurate. There are no shacks in Soweto. Those are concrete or brick-built houses, and every family has its own house. Very simple, very plain. But they do have their own little gardens, and there's certain areas where there are some quite fantastic and splendid houses, mansions in Soweto.
I want to talk to you about the international difficulties and
Yes.
the fact that South Africa may face a war.
Yeah.
But first of all, this is a primer for me.
Yes,
We've got the Afrikaners.
that's right.
And we've got, what do you call your English people?
The English,
The Afrikaners and the English.
That's right.
They have the full vote.
that's right.
And the parliament is composed of Afrikaners and English and a few token Cape Coloured and East Indians?
No, only whites. In other words, only Afrikaners and English.
The others have no voting representation at all?
No,
Not in that house?
Not in that house.
Is there any move in the Constitution to give them some kind of...
This is where the President's Council come in, because it's expected that the President's Council will recommend that equal citizenship would be extended to the people of colored race and East Indian descent.
There haven't been any visible conflicts within South Africa itself recently, haven't they?
No, I think what's happened is that I think there's general acceptance of the government's determination and sincerity by all within South Africa that he is prepared to change. The big problem is, you know, there is a right-wing backlash. And to what extent this backlash will act as a brake on the Prime Minister's reforms.
This is Botta's.
Botha, that's right. Yes.
Botta's government. Back to the primer again. If I'm an African native or whatever living in Soweto or its equivalent, do I need a pass to move?
Yes, you do.
I must carry a pass in the streets?
That's right.
You haven't got rid of that yet?
No, unfortunately not. It's still there. There is an attempt to streamline the pass laws, but this may be, I might use this as an example of, I think, of some of the changes that are taking place. In the past, for example, the government decided that this was going to be done to the blacks within South Africa. Indicative of the new approach is that when legislation was planned to streamline the pass laws and sort of improve that, they actually published this draft legislation beforehand, invited comments from people within South Africa. And there was such an outcry from the blacks that the government withdrew it and appointed a multiracial committee to actually study this legislation and come forward with...
Next question in my primer. If I'm a white mechanic, or if I'm a black mechanic, moving into work in Johannesburg or Cape Town or whatever, do I get the same wages as the white mechanic?
I'm not quite sure about that, because if you'd asked me the question, say, 2-3 years ago, I would have said no.
No.
No. But there is a commitment on the part of the private sector, because they've drawn up certain codes of conduct where equal pay for equal work.
But how about a person like yourself and your organization, which you assure me is privately funded?
That's right.
And non-tax deductible.
That's right.
Doesn't this put you on a blacklist, sitting on a program in North America, and I saw you on PBS?
Yes.
Knocking the authoritarian right-wing government of Botha?
Yes.
Does that now put you on a blacklist of some kind?
No. Not at all. I think what we are viewed by the South African government...
A number of newspapermen have been chased out the country because they were fearful or were arrested and escaped.
Yes, but I think one has to look at the background there. We do have certain sort of laws which, by other standards, might be termed unjust and iniquitous. And when people sort of go beyond the law, then obviously they run into trouble with the government.
I mean, you've got that business, I remember you doing it to famous writers and whatnot, of making them incommunicado, house arrest.
That's right, yes. The house arrest and the detentions without trial and other coercive measures. Now, this, I think, is still a sort of leftover from the previous Prime Minister, John Vorster, because he was Minister of Police, and he thought that the only way to secure the peaceful survival of South Africa was through these coercive measures like bannings and
You're
detentions.
telling me, therefore, that Botha is a more realistic man.
Yes.
Who knows that a white South Africa, surrounded by rebellious blacks, is going to come to a quick death unless it gets support of its own blacks.
That's right. Yeah, this is, I think, the most dramatic change, is that he, through his tenure as Minister of Defense, had come to accept the premise of the military, that you cannot ensure the peaceful survival of South Africa by treating blacks as potential subversives. They will have to be brought into the system with a say in the running of the government.
Well, you certainly don't seem to be an apologist for Botha.
I hope not.
More with Dr. Visser after the break. Dr. Visser from Washington, D.C. How long have you been over here from South Africa?
6 years.
6 years.
Although I go back every year, because I think it's essential to go back and find out exactly what's been happening in my absence.
You wouldn't like to go back and live there because of the dangers of a real outbreak of war from South Africa's enemies all around its borders.
Yeah.
Would you like to go back and live there full
Yes,
time?
certainly, certainly. I think a lot of people think that South Africa is on the verge of an explosion, and I don't think so. And of course, there's the threat from black Africa.
Well, let's go back a step. Let's remember when the stuff used to run on the highway to Rhodesia, the old Rhodesia.
Yes, yes.
And tourists were getting shot, and borders were being cut.
That's right. Yes.
Now that you've got, what's the name of that place? Zimbabwe there.
Yes.
Conditions, I presume, are frozen with Zimbabwe.
Yes, although there's still trade taking place between Zimbabwe and South Africa. I mean, Zimbabwe is totally dependent on the South African railway system, for example. If South Africa decided to sort of topple the Rhodesian or Zimbabwean government, all it would have to do is just stop the trains, because nothing goes in and out of that country except through rail.
It's
through South Africa.
landlocked. It's landlocked.
It's landlocked, that's right, yes.
Now, I see one of the leaders in the government the other day in Zimbabwe was saying to Smith, the guy who declared unilateral Declaration of Independence.
Yes.
Get out, we don't want you.
That's right, yeah.
Do you think, I've got 5 stepsisters who are living somewhere, I've never seen them.
Yeah.
Living
I think
somewhere in the old Rhodesia.
Yeah, yeah.
Are they going to be safe?
Well, I don't know. This is the problem about Zimbabwe. You know, so when Mugabe came to power, there was general euphoria about the future of Zimbabwe, and I think that was an ill-founded euphoria, because the railways have literally grounded to a halt. And when Ian Smith referred to this in Parliament, he was threatened with expulsion and deportation. And I mean, the economy is coming to a standstill at the moment. There's a mass exodus of skilled people within the country. There's talk of nationalization, expropriation, one-party state, and so on. So I don't know. And whites, when they leave Zimbabwe at the moment, may only take, you know, their clothes with them. They may not even take their personal possession.
Zimbabwe is not a physical threat to South Africa.
No.
Where is the physical threat?
I think the physical threat basically at this point is from the Soviet Union and the arming of the countries of Mozambique, Angola, even Zimbabwe, and of course the presence of something like over 20,000 Cuban troops in Angola.
Still?
Yes, still.
What has that got to do with the raid which was on the wire service the other day? The second big raid on SWAPO.
Bases is in Angola, yes. Yeah.
Is that near Namibia?
That borders on Namibia, yes.
Now, Namibia is an old League of Nations
mandate, yes.
Mandate.
That's right, yes.
Which South Africa insists on holding.
Yeah. Well, what happened is, you know, so South Africa's presence has been sort of declared illegal in the territory. I think it's important, however, to recognize that South Africa actually conquered the territory.
When?
In 1915.
Oh.
At the request of the Allies from the Germans. So
that was the old German West Africa?
That's right, yes.
Oh, I see. So, but you're still occupying Namibia?
We are still occupying the Namibia, and at the moment there are negotiations going with the 5 contact group, you know, of which Canada is a member, the United States, Great Britain, France, and Germany, in order to resolve this problem and bring independence to Southwest Africa through the holding of free and fair elections.
At the moment, South Africa has a puppet regime in there?
Well, no, I wouldn't call it that, because the regime within Namibia has abolished all forms of racial discrimination. As a matter of fact, it's against the law to discriminate on the basis of the color of the skin.
And it's still under South African suzerainty?
That's right, yeah.
But the threat is from Angola?
The threat is from Angola and the 20,000 Cuban troops that run around in Angola.
What about Mozambique? That's on the other side.
That's on the other side, yes. Mozambique, because of its dependence on South Africa, has taken a sort of a low sort of profile with regard to South Africa, because they're totally dependent on South Africa, to the extent that 40,000 Mozambicans still come annually to South Africa to work on the South African mines. Mm-hmm. And of course we run their railways and their harbors. So I think the example of Mozambique is what we'd like to hold forward to people, is that despite ideological differences, we can still live like decent neighbors. Mm-hmm. And this is what we try and accomplish even with Zimbabwe under Mugabe.
Yeah. Is there a danger of an all-out war?
I don't think so at the moment. I think we'll probably see an increase in terrorist activities along our borders, and especially, I suppose, the eastern borders. But the guerrilla war, if it should take place in South Africa, would certainly not be as serious as the one in Zimbabwe, because the terrain in South Africa is particularly ill-suited for guerrilla warfare.
Even though the white is outnumbered 5 to 1, you have massive military superiority, I should imagine.
That's right.
In the southern tip of Africa.
That's right. You know, I think the London Institute for the Study of Conflict has said that there is no combination of armies in Africa that can pose a serious threat to South Africa.
First time round.
First time round. Maybe
unless
the second
the Soviet comes in.
Unless the Soviets come in. But I think should the Soviets come in, obviously all the mineral resources on which the West are critically dependent, you know, not even the United States and Canada, but Western Europe and Japan, would be endangered, and that would be the start of World War III. Because the West cannot allow to have those minerals denied to it.
In other words, even if it were a totally fascist state, which would agree that it's not,
yes.
It's an authoritarian state,
yes.
Even if it were, you're telling the United States, Western Europe, Britain,
yes.
could not allow South Africa to fall into communist hands. Why?
For the simple reason that, you know, so when you look at mineral resources, South Africa has something like 95% of the world's chrome.
Oh, for weapons.
Weapons. We have something like 83% of the world's manganese, 89% of the world's platinum, and just The list just goes on and on about all these minerals. And the American Geological Institute remarked, for example, last year that without chrome, without manganese, without cobalt, without platinum, there can be no sophisticated weapons, no automobiles, no satellites, no jet engines, not even home appliances.
So therefore, we can forget about the political internal problems of South Africa and say, the United States would say, the buck stops here.
That's
we
right.
will not let South Africa become communist dominated.
That's right. You cannot. Because, you know, it's interesting that...
All the other airy-fairy stuff goes out the window and we get back to real politics.
You get to national interest, national survival. You know, the interesting thing is that in his recent book, The Real War, President Nixon mentioned that Brezhnev was once indiscreet enough to confide to the president of Somalia that the ultimate aim of the Soviet Union is to gain control over the treasure houses on which the West depend. And those two are, first of all, the Middle East with its oil and the mineral treasure house of Southern Africa.
Yeah. Hey, what do you think will happen if there are hitmen and they do get Reagan? Don't let's think about it. Because in my opinion, the United States would just
That's right.
occupy Libya.
Yes. Now that man is it's a lunatic.
Unbelievable.
Yes. And you know, the incredible thing about this is that he is going to be the new president of the Organization of African Unity.
Gaddafi.
Yes.
Oh, he had people working in Angola too, didn't he? Send no, where?
No, that was in Chad.
He's in Chad and Zaire.
Zaire, no, Zaire is basically pro-Western still. Although there were the two invasions from Angola supported by the Cubans, which knocked out the cobalt mines.
What is your message, therefore, to ordinary baffled Canadians?
I think...
What is your message about South Africa?
I think...
Having told us that in the final analysis it can't be occupied because the U.S. would stop it.
Yeah.
They're South Africa's open ally.
Yes.
Must be.
We must.
Okay. What's your message to ordinary baffled people about it? Is the country moving into the daylight?
Yes. Yes. I think this is the most important thing. There is change within South Africa. It's maybe not going as fast as people would like it, but there is change. And I think the time has come for us to sort of recognize that efforts are being made to move away from discrimination towards a society with the greatest amount of justice and freedom for all.
Let's take some calls to Dr. Visser on South Africa. We'll probably get some South African, you can't call them refugees, migrants to this country.
Expatriates.
Expatriates is better. That's such as you are for the moment.
Yes.
After the break. I don't know what kind of response we'll get to your views in South Africa. Go ahead, please.
Oh, is this Webster?
Yep.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the doctor about. I was in South Africa in July and August of 1979, and I noticed in the washrooms there, even the Orientals, they had to use different washrooms along with the blacks and the coloreds and stuff. I thought the white supremacy thing was pretty far-reaching. It just didn't go to what was happening within the country there. Like Oriental tourists would have to use different washrooms.
Okay, doctor.
I think the Oriental tourists in South Africa certainly, I think, can use white facilities. But I think when you got in South Africa in 1979, you basically saw the cumulative effect of something like 30 years of nationalist rule within South Africa and all the discriminatory measures which they had imposed. With the movement away, obviously, one cannot expect the sort of overnight dismantling of all these things for political reasons, you know. But what we've seen is we've seen a desegregation of, say, hotels, for example, sports facilities, restaurants, libraries, theatres and parks within South Africa, and even the integration of private schools in South Africa. And I think that is indicative of the way we're going.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to sort of bring the fellow's attention to the fact that there was a separate state created in southeastern northeastern Africa, South Africa, a separate country, so to speak, where I hear they're just sort of, there's not much there, and they're just busloading everybody out to this wilderness.
Is he talking about
relieve?
Just a minute. Is he talking about Namibia?
I don't know. I think maybe he's talking about the Transkei. I'm not quite sure. The Transkei was one of the countries that took independence from South Africa. And it's basically an undeveloped country, sort of a very rural and agricultural country with no industry whatsoever. And the government's policy prior to the present Prime Minister was basically to ship these people back to where they came from, saying that, because of their tribal links, they would have to go back there. But I think that is changing at the moment. There is a sort of a new realism that you cannot ship people back to an area which they've never lived in, especially if they've lived in the cities for 2-3 generations. So they have become tribalized and should be seen as forming part of white South Africa.
Transkei, is that the old Zulu territory?
No, that's the homeland of the Xhosa people. That's where the Xhosa group settled, when they came into contact with the whites as the whites were moving up into the interior.
So they're even softening on this tribalization?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Dr. Webster, I'd like to know how your government can justify, please, the fact that there are 80% black people occupying the country. The whites and others represent approximately 20%.
Yes.
And how that there could not be black representation along the new government lines that are now being sought to establish a new constitution. You've got the white, the Afrikaan, the English, and the Indian represented, but no black. How can that be justified, sir?
It cannot be justified. It's simple. It cannot be justified. But I think, I think one's got to look at where it's going. The chairman of the President's Council, which is actually working on this new constitutional proposal, told me when I was in South Africa recently that they will come forward with I said, equal citizenship for these three groups and guidelines to bring in blacks. You have to include the blacks. That's clear. And that's coming.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I would like to say it a little differently to this gentleman. I'm a Canadian, first of all. In the war, I was very seriously wounded, and I was shipped to South Africa for treatment. And they looked after me like no one else could. I couldn't get home because of the Italian invasion. I had a broken back, among other things. They couldn't handle me in Canada or even in Britain. South Africa took me in. I was in the Baragwanath Military Hospital just outside of Johannesburg. They treated me like no one else had ever done. That hospital is now a native hospital, and it's one of the best ones. I don't think the Vancouver General could stack up to it.
Well, that's a word of thanks.
Pardon?
It's a word of thanks to South Africa.
More than that, why don't you ask them about the nice things that are being done for the blacks? Ask them how many native blacks are millionaires driving around in limousines with chauffeurs and everything else. We don't have our natives being treated like that.
Oh, they just have the odd Mercedes-Benz.
Don't let our natives get the advantages that the blacks have down there.
Okay, do you want to
The
tackle that?
natives that are being treated well and they have good homes and are being given a chance to advance. Our natives aren't being treated like that. What do we do to our... Go down to 41st and Marine Drive and see how our natives
Yeah,
live.
we know the score on that.
Well,
what do you want to say to them?
You bring this kind of stuff out, some of the advantages that they do down there. These people that phone and say, run them down because they're not doing the right thing to the natives. Go down to 41st and Dunbar, go up to the Northwest Territories and see what we're doing to the natives.
Well aware of it. Tackled it in detail many a time. We're talking about South Africa.
South Africans, some of them are 14 generations born there, white. They've got to have a chance, too.
I'd like to say that it is true, the white...
Matter of fact, you should now give the entire country back to the original Aboriginal peoples.
No, well, you see, the thing is, I think
that's a local joke. It's a local joke.
Okay.
I say God bless South Africa and every South African there is.
Good, man. Much obliged for your call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, Jack, I just want to compliment you on having such an interesting person on. It's nice to listen to this, to know what's going on the other side of the world. We do read little bits of this and that in the paper, but this is much more educating for us, and I compliment you on having Dr. Glasser here.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Go ahead, please. Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Are you waiting for my question? I'm not quite sure what to do.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I am now a Canadian, and if I sound rather emotional, please forgive me. I would like to know what Dr. Visser thinks about the massacre in Soweto. I was there at the time, and I must tell you that whatever he says, it's far too smooth. It is a terrible situation there. The massacre was in 1976, and it was not publicized enough in the world. Children and young people were shot dead for what they wanted a better education, which has not been given to them. I want to know what Dr. Visser thinks about South Africa stooping to kill young people to get what the whites want.
Fair enough, Dr.
Well,
Visser.
fair enough. I must agree with that. I think that the massacre or the riot and the shooting of children within Soweto was deplorable. It's a blot in our name. I think it's something which we will never live down. And, you know, I share my abhorrence of that criminal deed. But at the same time, I must also say, when massacres of equal magnitude happen in the rest of the world, why is there no outcry against them? When a quarter of the people of the Equatorial Guinea is being massacred by its own leader, why is there this deafening silence from the rest of the world? When the survivors of plane crashes in the old Zimbabwe are massacred by the terrorist organization, why don't you speak out? Why must you only speak out about South Africa? I'm not saying we're perfect. We have got a long way to go. And I'm ashamed of many things in my country. But at the same time, I'm also proud of the things we've achieved and the things we are going to achieve despite the opposition of the rest of the world who want to bring about bloody revolution in my country.
Not the rest of the world, not the Americans.
No, certainly not. But some of these people who advocate violence because they would like to watch it on the television
I
screens.
always loved the International Churches Organizations who raise money for guerrilla arms in Zimbabwe.
That's right.
What was the name of that group again? Doesn't matter. You know the group I mean.
Oh, yes, the Patriotic Front.
Yeah, but the actual church group. It's the World Council of Churches.
Oh, yes, that's right, yes.
How they could raise money for guns for guerrillas is almost as stupid as the Americans raising money for both sides in Belfast.
Yes, yeah, that's equal.
Thank you, ma'am, for your call. One more segment with Dr. Visser after this break. Go ahead to Dr. Visser of the South Africa Foundation.
Yes, Jack.
Yeah.
I'm from South Africa myself.
Yeah?
Are you hearing me, Jack?
Loud as a bell. Get to the point.
Okay, Dr. Visser.
Yes.
I'm from Pretoria. I was born in South Africa in 1930. I've been in this country.
Never mind the history. What's your point?
My point is that I think that you're dead to right. My point is that Dr. Visser is absolutely right.
Uh-huh.
And if I go along with him 100%.
Good, I'm much obliged. Thank you very much. Where do I go, Gladys? From Soyuz.
Good morning, yes.
Southeastern BC.
I see.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning.
Dr. Visser.
Yes, good morning.
It's so refreshing to hear somebody really putting some straight facts on the television. Dr. Visser, I wanted to ask you one thing.
Yes.
Is there any truth in the fact that Chief Gatsa Buthelezi is thinking of incorporating Natal into Zululand? Because if he is, I'll go back.
It is a fact today that, you know, the Natal government cannot operate without the approval almost of Gatsa Buthelezi.
Who's Gatsa Buthelezi?
No, I'm a Roinek, obviously.
He is the chief minister of the Zulu people, the leader of the Zulu people within South Africa. And he said at one stage that he would take independence for Zululand, but then he will have to get all of Natal.
Yes.
And so I don't know what's going to happen. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what the government is going to do with Gatsa Buthelezi, because he is certainly a very outspoken critic and he cannot be ignored.
Just a minute. He's the Zulu head in South Africa.
That's right, yes.
Zululand is within South Africa.
That's right,
It's
yes.
a tribal area.
Tribal area, yes.
Natal is one of the...
A province of, it was the old colony of Natal, and then formed part of South Africa when South Africa was founded.
And still is.
And still is. And Zululand is incorporated into Natal.
And why would you want to go back if Gatsa Buthelezi takes over?
Why should I want to go back? Because I was brought up in Natal, we spoke Zulu. We didn't know anything about apartheid, believe me. We were just kids all living together and being happy, and I'd be quite happy to go back and live there again. It's a fabulous country. I understand the Zulu people, and I don't have a problem with them.
Yes,
How long have you been out here?
I've been here 14 months. I was in Spain a couple of years. Actually, we came to retire. We're not running away from anything.
You just came for this.
And I paint, and we just faff around and paint and enjoy ourselves.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
And she lives in a place called Osayas in southeastern British Columbia.
I see.
Which gets very hot in the summer.
Oh.
Go ahead, please.
Dr. Visser, pardon me.
Yes.
I would like to apologize for some of my country stance on South Africa. I believe South Africa is right to solve their own problems, and we should keep our bloody noses out of it. The same thing if applied if South Africa stuck their nose into Canadian problems. The Canadians would be up in arms.
Just a minute. Do we stick our nose into South Africa's problems? Yes. Haven't we got a ban on shipments to South Africa?
Well, you cannot export any military equipment to South Africa.
Even from the States?
Even from the States. That's because of the United Nations Security Council arms embargo.
But you managed to get it.
Oh, we managed to get it. But you know, I might point out something here which is interesting, is that I don't think it's commonly realized that that arms embargo against South Africa cannot be lifted until such time as South Africa becomes a Marxist state. For the simple reason that to lift that arms embargo, it is now dependent on the Russian vote. And Russia must vote favorably or positively to lift that arms embargo. And I can't see the Soviet Union voting to lift an arms embargo against South Africa.
But you managed to get arms, don't you?
Oh yes, we are the largest exporter of arms in the Southern Hemisphere because of this, because we had to develop our own arms industry.
Yeah, the CBC is always doing programs, radio programs about the dreadful scandal of shipping arms to South Africa.
Yes.
But you've got to get them one way or another.
Well, we're going to defend ourselves.
Dr. Visser.
Do you have the nuclear weapon?
I don't know. I don't know. There is speculation that we have. I know we do have the process to enrich uranium. But whether we've actually built a weapon, I don't know.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, one thing too is we do business with all countries in the world. A lot of them are dictatorships with torture chambers and everything else. Mm-hmm. And the Canadian government does nothing about that.
Yes.
They have to pick out South Africa, which I think is absolutely ludicrous.
Well, thank you, sir. Much obliged for your call. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. I just want to phone in and thank the doctor very much, because as an ex-resident of South Africa, I just want to say how pleased I am to hear someone like you projecting to the people of Canada the truth about South Africa. And after living there 4 years, we began to understand life in South Africa. You really must live among the people to understand the problem. The changes that we saw were incredible from 1976 until 1980, when we left. The people are working out their own problems, and I think the rest of the world needs support. We need to give support to South Africa, not criticize them.
Take a bow, Dr. Visser.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. That's very kind.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Is it true that the government of South Africa is controlled by an establishment group, somewhat akin to the English public school system, which provides continuous government and regular major politicians, so there's never any change in the apartheid policy?
Just like the establishment in Canada.
Oh, it's much stronger.
There is, excuse me, there is an organization in South Africa called the Broederbond, which is basically a fraternity of brothers.
The name I was looking for.
That's right. And they certainly play a very important part within the government. But I don't think the Broederbond should be seen at this particular stage as resistant of change. I think the past president of the Broederbond, Dr. Viljoen, is one of the most enlightened people in the South African cabinet, and is actually one of the four in the forefront.
Had they provided most of the last politicians, most of the last prime ministers?
Yes, in the past it certainly was a very formidable body, but it was basically to uplift the Afrikaner economically and establish him also politically. But since these two goals have to a large extent been achieved, they have faded back into the background.
Thank you, sir. One final question. Is there any single English-speaking politician who might one day become the Premier of South Africa?
I don't know.
I mean, is there one outstanding one?
No, the leader of the opposition party is Van Zyl Slabbert. He's an Afrikaner. We went to university together, and I know him very well, but he's Afrikaans. You see, the thing is, because of the tribal divisions, even the whites in South Africa are very tribal. You get the English-speaking section and the Afrikaans section, and the Afrikaners, making up 60% of the population, will always dominate, so you always have to have an Afrikaner.
Well, we've got a French and English and French.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah, what do I say now? Vat your guten trek, Andre?
That's right. I will depart.
What does that mean? Pick up your bags.
Pick up your bags and go.
Yanni Mani Herpel Bin. On another occasion we could sing it.
We'll try.
That's a memory of mine from Cape Town. My thanks to Dr. Visser. Next, the Fighting Fisherman, after the break. Dr. Peter Pierce brought down a pretty explosive report on the fishing industry the other day. And I never did cover the sports aspect of the fishing industry, but it seems to quite sensible. Now when you come to the commercial aspect, he said, as we've been told 10,000 times before, too many boats chasing too few fish. And he zeroed in on three particular areas of fishing: salmon, herring, and halibut. And he came up with a scheme, which is still hard to understand, but it's another buyback program. Although this time the money would be raised for buying back surplus boats, by 50 million of government seed money, and by royalties levied on the fish brought in by the fishermen. And then here's another scheme whereby boats wouldn't be licensed, people would be licensed. Now I have here three spokesmen for their particular branches of the fishing industry. And they are John Sanderson, who is the Pacific Trawlers Association.
That's right.
Now let me get your group clear. How many boats?
About 500 members in that area. It varies.
About 500 boats, then?
Yep.
And you troll for salmon?
We troll for salmon, principally off the west coast of Vancouver Island.
And you are not allied with the United Fishermen and Allied Workers Union?
No.
You're non-union?
We're non-union.
You used to have a lot of fights with Homer Stevens in the old days?
We have done in the past.
Right. And then we have John Rivard. And he's the director, executive director?
That's right.
Of the Native Brotherhood, right?
That's right.
Give me a rundown on the Native Brotherhood's part in our fishing industry.
Well, the Brotherhood has been involved in the fishing industry for over 50 years now. And they represent the commercial section, also the shore workers, and also timbermen.
In other words, you represent all aspects of the fishing industry.
That's right.
Salmon, herring, ground fish as well.
Ground fish, yeah.
And, of course, the shore workers.
The shore workers.
Now, you have are you in the Fishermen's Union shore workers? No.
No, what we usually do is we joint bargain with the union.
How many people involved on land and on the sea?
In our organization?
Yeah.
Oh, we have a paid-up membership of around 3,500 people.
So you're a pretty big part of the fishing industry.
Right. Yes.
Then we have Ted Asu, isn't it?
That's right.
From Cape Mud. I think I interviewed your grandfather.
I wouldn't doubt it.
No, I don't like the way you say that. And your organization, Ted, is what?
Well, basically, we represent the Seine fishermen as a single group. We're relatively new, and our main objectives are just to involve ourselves with affecting decisions affecting our
So you're the
our
Pacific
members.
Coast Salmon Sailors Association.
That's right.
Are you members of the United Fishermen and Allied Workers Union?
Many of our members are whole deal memberships. We don't try and encourage our members to either way.
You negotiate with the Native Brotherhood? Or?
No, we stay out of negotiation processes. Our main objective is affecting decisions, political decisions to do with our members.
I see. And how many boats would be in your association?
Well, I couldn't say how many boats there are, about 400 to 500 seiners, but we represent 700 plus members at this time.
400 to 500. They're the boys that make the big catches, aren't they?
That's right.
You're the boys that scoop everything up when you go.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Now, are you happy, gentlemen? Who wants to tell me if you're happy with the basic idea of the Pierce report, or if we come back over the old Jack Davis caper, which saw the public, God bless them, subsidize the buybacks in many ways and the boats reappearing in other fisheries? Are you happy with the Pierce recommendation?
I can't even answer that. I think the thing that we can say is that we've had it 1 month and we don't know at this point. Clearly, what is clear to me is that it makes a major social change on the coast, that it has major social influence to how we fish, who fishes, principally who fishes. And what we're saying is that we can't answer that question. Nobody can answer that question. And what we're looking for is, and the reason we've formed our task group and are trying to pull all the groups together, is to look at this and see what it does to. For a trawler, it wipes it out. There will be no trolling, in my opinion.
You mean you'd be wiped out by?
I believe gear licensing, which is one of the features for a trawler, is deadly.
And for people who don't know, you're the guys with the smaller boats with the big heavy gear with the weights on it.
Hook and line.
Hook and line fishermen, right? And you think this would wipe you out?
I believe so. That's personal. That's my belief about trawlers.
Now, how about the Native Brotherhood?
Well, we've taken about 200 boat owners and gone back 3 years in their statements, financial statements, and try to apply that royalty tax to it, and they're wiped out, whether they're seiners, trollers, or gill netters. So if
you mean if you put on the Pierce royalty tax onto their catches?
That's it.
But that would just put up the price to Muggins, the consumer, wouldn't it?
Well, I don't know, because you still have to sit around the table and bargain for your prices, and if prices in markets the way they're saying they're going now, that they're down, you're not going to get any more money for your fish. You're going to pay additional royalty tax. You've got, in addition to that, we've got increased interest cost, increased fuel costs, increased maintenance costs. We're out of business. You don't need a buyback.
Well, you heard what I said maybe at the beginning of the program. Yeah, but we see great stuff on television about the magnificent catches on the West Coast, especially in the seiners, right? Magnificent catches. Everybody rushes out and buys $1 million boat. Next year it's a bad catch and they're all moaning the blues.
Yeah.
Is that not traditional for fishermen?
Well, there is the cycle that fishermen live with. They have their good catches and they have their low catches. But the idea behind this, forming this federation, or this people coming together as fishermen in this industry, is to try to look at those problems, those cyclical problems, those problems that they have to deal with every year, and try to get some kind of a management structure involved in the industry.
Everybody who's fishing.
Everybody who's fishing. We have, like, for instance, trollers and seiners and gill netters. They have gear conflicts. Okay, up to date, the fisheries and oceans have not been able to deal effectively with those gear conflicts. What this federation is saying is we're depending on the fishing as our livelihood. So it's up to us to come up with the answers.
Now, how about the seiners? How do you feel about the Pierce report, Ted?
Well, the potential of the Pierce report is it's got a lot of positive things. I think, like our submission to the Pierce report is incorporated in a lot of the things that he's come up with on the preliminary report. But as Mr. Sanderson said, it's worthwhile for us to have the opportunity to review his preliminary report and come up with a positive or a good way to...
Let's go to the basic Pierce recommendation. Sometimes so simple, and it's been said for so long. Are there too many boats chasing too few fish?
Oh, I believe so. I believe that's true.
But will buyback affect that thing? We would argue, or I would suggest, that the bulk of the fish are caught by fairly few boats. If you take out a large chunk of boats, I suggest you don't affect the catch at all. What we're seeing now, and Pierce mentions in his report, is a stable catch. It's been stable for some years.
So all you're saying is a buyback would make more money for the best operators?
No, I suggest the best operators are getting those fish now. They'll get them later, and the guys who'll buy out will be relatively small percentage of the total catch. It may cost an awful lot of money to get them out, and maybe it's necessary. I don't know. But what it's going to do is it's going to raise the cost to, well, the sports fishery, the same thing, the license in the sports fishery. The way he's regulating the sports fishery is by making it expensive, just like they've done in New Brunswick.
All right, just a minute. Fee for Canadians, $5. Non-residents, $20.
Oh no, that's right now. In his report, he says the way, there is no point in regulating the sports fishery. The way to control the entry is to limit the number of people who get in there. The way to limit the people who get in there is to raise the cost of entry. Now,
oh yeah, license fees could be held low, it says, but a charge levied per fish through a tag or punch card system. The higher the charge, the less the need for bag limits.
That's...
Oh, wait till the fishermen learn about this. They'll scream their heads off. They're sports fishermen.
If they find out, it's the same on the West Coast for commercial fishermen, Jack, that if we have historically in this country said that small people should be harvesting the resource, ordinary people, the companies have tried to get in and have been stopped, and have not really. They control the processing, but not the catching. This puts them, I believe, makes it so expensive, in the same way it does for the sports fishermen, it makes it so expensive for a commercial fisherman to be in there that he can't. The halibut quota is paid in advance. 1/3 of your income payable to your boss on the 1st of January in hopes that you might get it back during the year.
Oh, sure.
That's what it is. That's exactly what it is.
If I've got a halibut license and I'm going to go out fishing on halibut, they set me a quota. And I have to pay 1/3 of that in advance?
1/3 of your net. At 10 cents a pound, he suggests, that's roughly 10% of your gross. Take that down to net. It's about, the guy takes a $100,000 season. He takes
Seems
home
like
30.
you want another Royal Commission on Piercy's Royal Commission.
I think it's well thought out. He's done a good job.
This is just a preliminary report, too.
Not for us. The 1982 regulations, that's it.
Okay, more with the fishermen. Ted Assu, John Rivard, and John Sanderson. After the break. Now, these three fishermen, I almost said gentlemen, but they're fishermen, represent a fair chunk of the fishing industry in BC. Seiners, all the lot, everything, and trollers. You're the wee guys.
That's right.
That hang off outside the mouth. No, you're west coast of Vancouver Island.
West Coast Vancouver Island. We actually, we have members over the whole coast, but the bulk is on the west coast of Vancouver.
Yeah. How many, what about the Fishermen's Union? If the United Fishermen and Allied Workers Union doesn't join in with you on this federation, you're dead, haven't you?
Yeah, we have talked extensively to the union. They've been told that there's an empty chair on the task group, and we want them there.
Who are you missing? Who else are you missing from your task group?
I think one of the problems with the union is that, when you look at what we're trying to establish here, we're trying to establish a federation of fishermen, but there's other interest groups like the processing companies, and also there's the sports fishermen, and then there's also the Indian interest. There's other groups that will have to come together also. And
so what you want to do is to get an all-encompassing task force which represents all aspects of the fishing industry to sit down with Pierce or the government?
No. What we're trying to do is put together a group of commercial fishermen into a federation to bring all the commercial fishing interests together to speak for commercial fishing. We also believe that other areas of the industry are going to have to do the same thing, because as we get stronger and more unified, they're going to have to, and that's what we'd like to see. So what we sit now is we argue with the bureaucrats in the government, and we come in, we fight, we sit here and we fight each other.
And the bureaucrat sits
there, and he sits there and he grins, and he does it his way.
But you're the people most liable to be hurt, aren't you?
Well, we are.
Control us.
Well, we are.
They'll get him next.
We're all hurt.
Everybody's just as
We're all
vulnerable
hurt.
as the
Everybody's
others.
hurt.
You don't fancy a quota?
Not at all, myself.
You go out on the west coast of Vancouver Island for the big salmon runs, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe inshore. And if they set you a quota, mind you, don't they set you quotas now?
Well, the effects of conservation program that the Department of Fisheries established now it's astronomical the way I see it. We're pretty well regulated to the point where we only fish 1 day a week at times, or even 12 hours, and that's most of the time we get to work in one week of the fishery.
But you didn't do too bad last year, did you?
No, it worked out fairly well for the majority of the fishermen, the same fishermen on the coast.
Well, maybe their conservation is good.
No, we fish the Chinooks and the coho, and I'll tell you, we fished out there. They aren't there anymore. It's a lovely thing. You look at the total catch, and the fish are coming in at about the same numbers, but we can sit on a 100-yard spot now.
What you're telling me is that the trawler really is an old-fashioned type of fishing, which is really going down the tube.
Not at all. The Pierce or the submission we made to the Pierce report did work on the problems, and the trolling is a very efficient use of fishing effort, and produces a very high quality, high priced fish. That's the only market for fresh frozen salmon is.
Another point in the Pierce report is that he recommends an Indian Fishing Development Corporation, and he throws in couple of $million for that too, to develop what?
Well, I tell you that.
Does the Native Brotherhood, after all these years and after all these millions it's made in fishing, does it need another damn government subsidy of some kind?
We're not asking for a government subsidy.
He's suggesting one, isn't it?
Well, not in the sense that we're looking for seed money to develop a corporation that would deal with all the interests that the Indian people have in the commercial fisheries. And any government program, and you know that, Jack, yourself, that comes out from the bureaucracy is really ineffective as to trying to achieve its goals. What we've done here is we've fought for 3 years with the government and not giving any ground at all that we want to take this over and completely control it through an Indian Development Corporation run by Indian people.
Indian Fishermen's Development Corporation, non-profit, with the power to purchase licensed vessels from non-Indians and grant licenses to qualified Indian applicants. Is that fair?
Well, yes, it is fair in the sense that the Indian people now are categorized in a different license scheme, and consequently they're being prejudiced. If they want to opt out and sell their boat and their license, they can't. They have to sell it to another Indian or along that lake.
That's right. And this is this old business.
So what we're trying to do is we're trying to do away with that. We're looking at the licensing and say licenses as it stands now in our submission, and that applies for everybody, is an additional cost that the industry can't handle anymore. If you're talking about buying a 20-ton license, for instance, for a seiner, and the high price was $10,000 a couple of years ago, you're looking at putting $200,000 just for the right to fish. What we want to do is we want to buy the license, there's no value to it, put it into the corporation, and then lease it out to an Indian fisherman. But the license will never be worth anything anymore, as such as trading on the market.
That's good. I mean, I like that. That's one of the good aspects of his. I remember being on an old junker. What's his name again? You remember the name of the skipper of the Freeland?
I can't remember the fellow's name.
What was the name of the skipper of the Freeland? No. Anyway, he's got a 70-foot boat called the Freeland. And that sold for a fortune years ago because he had a combination license. Salmon and halibut. That's the best license of all to have, isn't it? What is it that Pierce recommends on taking the licenses off the boats?
I think he's isolating the licenses on the boats now. I don't think you can transfer them anywhere.
I think they're going from boats to people.
Well, partly that, but they're also going in, they're staying on the boats as well. He's suggesting that if anything you caught over the last couple of years, if you were a trawler, for example, for the last couple of years, you're a trawler now forever, unless you want to buy another license. If you can't make a living in the troll fleet, you've got to go out and buy a $60,000 gillnet license. And this is the problem, that if I am now getting squeezed in the troll fleet, I've got to go and buy another license to get out of it and move into the next fishery. There's no kind of automatic movement.
One thing you should remember, Jack, and the Pierce Commission, he has approached it both in the social and economic sense. And what he's saying is we take that amount of boats out, that should be that many more fish for the remaining people to catch. Hence, you can afford the royalty tax. Well, we're not convinced of that yet. That's why the Federation...
All I know for sure is that the public will eventually pay for the royalty tax. No. And you know it as well as I do, don't you?
But all those small people get out of the business too. And I think what you're seeing here, Jack,
teachers moonlighting, policemen moonlighting.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Good.
But I think what you're seeing here is the need to take a look at. There's a lot in this report that's
Got
good.
the message. Any fishermen want to join in? Join in now, after the break. I'll just push the buttons now. You speak up. Campbell River, go ahead.
Morning, Jack, John, and Teddy.
Oh, Jack, John, Teddy, and Teddy. Teddy. Okay, go ahead from Campbell. Are you an American tourist up canning salmon out of season?
River?
No, speak up.
I was wondering, like, 10 years ago, it was suggested that some of our Native Brotherhood meetings, that we would...
You gotta turn down the volume in the television set. It's driving you crazy. Turn it down. Do as you're told. Then speak up.
It's Rocky Clock System.
Right. Come on, Rocky. That's better. Speak up.
Was suggested by some fishermen that the conventional gear, like for the depletion in stock, that the conventional gear be banned and that we revert back to the old way of fishing. And it's proved a success for the American fishermen because they did it in 1960 and they have an 85% interest in stock.
Can you explain this to me?
Well, we have the hydraulic drum, which is very conventional gear. And
I'm lost.
it expedites the amount of sets that a fishing seine boat can do in one day.
I think he's talking about table.
The old, we used to make a possible 7 sets under the old table seine system.
Well, you've lost me. I'll have to get John to explain it to me.
Well, I don't know the process exactly, but I believe there was a table seine that which was less efficient than the...
There was a lot slower means of catching fish.
You couldn't catch so many fish, in other words.
Well, you could catch, theoretically you could catch as many fish, but when the more competition came out with the more boats in the fleet, the hydraulic drum was developed.
Yeah.
And at this time, instead of making, say, 7 sets during a day, you could make as many as 30. If you really push it, and that's within a maybe 20-hour workday.
It doesn't matter how long it takes you to catch the fish if you only catch your quota, though, does it?
It's one of the but it's one of the issues that that we're trying to deal with as fishermen. I mean, there's a lot of issues that we're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, you're worried about gear regulations.
In isolating between kinds of gear, I'm worried about. He's worried about the reduction in the ability to use gear. We, for example, the trawlers were reduced from unlimited number of girdies, the cranks, to bring the lines in.
I know what a girdy is.
Down to 6 this last year. Well, 6 girdies for us, the gear limitation, means that we can't catch pink salmon efficiently or sockeye salmon efficiently, which is a major change in our ability to fish.
They can really cut your throat by gear regulations, can't
That's
they?
right. And with the drum seine, knock the drum seine off, and I don't know.
What would happen if you knocked off the hydraulic drum seine?
Well, the same thing. Well, I guess what would happen is the older fellows who grew up using a table seine would be able to... They do pretty well, but the younger guys probably be a little bit
So complicated. Thanks, Rocky. Naima, go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I'm a halibut fisherman, and I don't see any representation there among those gentlemen. But anyway, to get back to the Pierce report, the salmon fishermen are going to be assessed 5 cents a pound on their fish when this fish is caught. Now, nothing about the halibut here. I've got to take a quota out of, say, like I've got a 50-foot boat. Now, I've got to take a quota out of 100,000 pounds. Now, I've got to pay $10,000 before I can drop a hook.
John Sanderson told me that.
For my quota. Now, listen. I've got to pay with my grub and ice and fuel another $9,000 with my insurance. I'm looking at about $21,000 before I can even catch a bloody fish. Now, how the hell can I make any money that way?
Before
I even start.
Just a moment now. You were selling your halibut for $2 something a pound.
Oh, gee, that's only down to $1.05.
It was $2.
Oh, yeah, but that's...
Wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And you made a fortune then, didn't you?
No, I wasn't fishing. I didn't own my own boat then, Jack. I just bought my boat last year.
You're too late, wasn't he?
Yeah, but now look what I'm looking at.
Well, I think that's one...
Does the gentleman say anything about this around the table?
Yes, John Sanderson pointed out that this was a grave inequity to halibut fishermen.
And we also invited the halibut fishermen's organizations to join us in the task group. They didn't show up on Sunday. We're still after them. Hopefully you get on your organization, and there's a chair for you as well.
Tell me, is the Freeland still selling?
Yeah, she's still out there. I feel sorry for you when you were on board.
Worst week I ever had in my life.
You're a tough old nut anyway, Jack.
Not that bad. At least I didn't throw up and I didn't jump over the side.
Listen, Jack, an old seagull like you should never get seasick.
Well, I've got my remedy for seasickness, and I'm not going to tell you on the air. More after the break. Sailors, Brotherhood, and Trawlers. Go ahead, please.
Gentlemen, it seems to me, or to the general public at large, that the fishing has been ruined in large part by the damming and pollution of the streams, whether it's done by forestry firms, gravel pits, or construction firms. As associations, why don't you collectively sue them for loss of revenues?
Now, do you care about this enrichment? I know you care about the enrichment program, but that's not part of your problem at the moment, is it?
Not right at the moment. We have committees that work on this. The whole process is being worked on. But I agree with the guy about the suing, though, that we've talked, I have personally talked to lawyers about it. I think there's some legal problems, but that would be the best environmental protection process
Maybe
that we could invent.
under the basis of an organization such as a federation, would be better off to and have a stronger voice and issue
You
some
don't
kind
need
of thing
to
like
sue. All you got to do is hit them over the head hard enough and long enough. It really is. You know, don't become another Greenpeace.
No, I accept.
I wouldn't be the least bit surprised by what they started a campaign next year about cruelty to salmon. I don't be surprised.
Tried on herring.
Did they try on
that.
herring?
Yeah, they have tried it, yeah.
Hey, you got to be joking.
No, that was last year there.
No, it was 2 years ago.
What do these guys do for a living?
They were
How
threatening
do
last
they
year
make
to
a
do it,
living?
too.
That's what I'd like to know. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Webster.
Yeah.
And yes.
Yes, go ahead.
The situation is, in the late 60s when they passed out all the licenses, the A, B, and C class licenses, the C class, D class licenses were all bottom fish licenses.
Right?
The A and B class licenses everybody fought for because there was too many boats on the coast to begin with. You fish between Port San Juan and Nia Bay, you got half of that. And then you got a Coast Guard cutter in front of you, and you got 25, 30, 50, 60 boats behind you, and you can only set 4 or 5 boats. That's outside the West Coast. On the inside, you got whatever you have, and that's fish only on the beach fish for the good fish on the inside.
So,
needless to say, A and B licenses are what we're talking about. And any bottom fish licenses, why do you have trawlers talking about bottom fish people when A and B licenses were what was everything to get?
Do you make any sense of his point?
Well, I think it's incidental halibut. He's that part of it maybe.
No, but it's bottom fish too.
Yeah. One of the things that the trawler has historically, and I'm not the guy to tell you the story here, but the trawler has historically caught halibut. It was original hook and line fishery. We got knocked off because of the halibut boats being knocked out of the U.S. waters. And it was cut out, or trawlers lost their privilege of holding halibut. We're asking for
But
an
trawlers
incidental.
can fish outside.
No, I don't follow you.
Well, I think maybe that's one of the specific problems that the federation is going to have to deal with. I mean, that's what we're here for, is to look at this formulation of this federation to deal with those specific problems that this gentleman just.
Okay, boy, best I can do for them. Sometimes it's over my head. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, how can these 3 people justify their position? They're weakening the whole fishing industry with splinter groups. There's 3 associations represented there. How many more have you got? Why don't you all belong to the Fishermen's Union and have some power?
Well, let me answer that. We have 7 groups that met on Sunday, and as far as the Fishermen's Union goes, I think they're having a problem right now dealing as to where they're going to fit, whether they're going to fit in the federation, because they have fishermen fishing in it, in the industry, or whether they're going to fit in the processing end where they have shore workers. There's a couple of questions they have to deal with. I'm going to be meeting with George Hewson at 12 today to discuss the federation further with him. They believe in the concept. When we made our submission to Pierce, they backed the concept of setting up some kind of a council or federation to deal with the specific problems that fishermen face themselves. So they have, the transcripts show they are on record for supporting this.
Well, there's Hewson might come along with you. Nickel might come along with you. I mean, you have good feeling with the UFAWU, have you?
Well, we joint bargain with them every year, so and we've come to their aid when it's needed.
Good point. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning, sir.
You know, My comment is that I wonder, the sea's a cold, cruel place, and so can free enterprise be. I wonder what happens if we just get rid of government regulations. Isn't that the best and most natural way to reduce the size of the fleet?
Gentlemen.
Get rid of government altogether.
Now, we're not talking about the Indian Affairs Department. We know it's a disaster. And we know it, we accept that.
Well, we also
How
know
about the
fisheries
federal
in the-
budget?
It's another disaster.
How about the Department of Fisheries?
Probably a disaster. Say something nice about somebody for a change.
Well, yeah, we're saying...
I like John.
What about Romeo LeBlanc?
I like John, and I like...
No comment.
No comment, and that's not for publication. Go ahead, please. Wrong one. Go ahead, please.
Jack, you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Yes, Jack, I want to make a comment about I'm an Indian fisherman.
Good.
And any time there's a commission looking into the fisheries, Indian people, we feel very uncomfortable. Because any regulations that come out from these hearings seem to be designed to push Indian people out of the industry. You know, you've had the McKenna-McBride commissions, the Sinclair Commission, and now the Pierce Commission.
Well, he's made some generous...
Suggestion that Pierce makes about the subsidies to go towards Indian people. You know, at one time, before the coming of the white man, the Indian people owned 100% of the fisheries. In the 1920s, we were pushed down to 27%. Today, we make up 9% of the industry. And that has to change, Zach. Indian people along the coast, many of them depend totally on the fishing industry to improve themselves both economically and socially. And it's up to the government, who are responsible for the well-being of Indian people, to make sure that Indian people continue to participate.
Well, the Indian people are also
Just
a minute. The Indian people are also responsible for their own well-being, aren't they, John?
Well, I think, you know, when what the gentleman's saying here is that there has been so many departments fiddling around with the well-being of Indian people that, you know, the government has to recognize that the Indian people have a say in the industry, and they have the expertise to look after their own welfare. Just give them a chance.
Well, isn't that what Pierce recommends?
Well, that's one of the things that Pierce is recommending, but, you know, the implementation, as I say, we've been working 3 years on that particular program, and every time we get somewhere that we're ready to move on it, some other bureaucrat walks in, and we have to start all over again. Now, we've dealt through 3 director generals in that program.
Just a minute. Has there not been
3 ministers?
Has there not been a vast improvement in the techniques and the success of Indian fishermen on the coast in the past 25 years?
I would say not, no.
Down the way?
I would say down, yes.
Whose fault was it? Indian Affairs Department?
Well, I think the regulations, as the gentleman said, and the Indian Affairs Department's lack of response to that need has caused a lot of problems with the... I mean, people are getting the wrong impression here that the, you know, that Indian people are, you know, complaining and always bitching about what's going on. But really, when you stop about it and think about it, it's happened to the whole industry. They're one segment of the industry, and...
You'd think that the non-Indians had no complaint. Look how we get put through, right?
But
we're all 3 here.
But you see, when the Native Brothers put their submission through with Pierce, they took the leadership role of developing something like this.
I think that's good. I'm sorry, sir, you finish what you're saying. Sir, where are you? Where is he? He's gone. Sorry about that. Okay, I'll try and have Romeo LeBlanc on this week. Does he know anything about the industry?
I shouldn't think so. He rarely comes out here.
My thanks to Teddy Sue, John Rivard, John Sanderson. It's life and death financially for a lot of people, the Pierce report and what the government does. I'll be back after the break. We're still working on the problem of Gary Watt, the unfortunate man who was made quadriplegic in an accident. If we need public donations, I'll ask you, okay? And I'm still selling tickets for Black Light Magic, the famous people players in ice, what's it called again? Ice skaters. Ice skaters, but it's all in Black Light Magic. There's the information up there. I'll be there too, on the stage, would you believe it? And I'll be back tomorrow, doing a piece on the highway, hopefully, 9 a.m. precisely.